The Northwood Academy annual gala was a sea of glittering jewels and rustling silk. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto the polished marble floors. The air hummed with the easy laughter of the city's elite. Every corner of the grand ballroom was a testament to wealth and power. For the students of Northwood, this was not just a party. It was a declaration of their place in the world. In a quiet corner, almost hidden behind a large marble pillar, stood Ilara. She was a ghost in this vibrant celebration. Her dress was a simple pale blue. It was impeccably clean, lovingly pressed, but it could not hide its age. The fabric was soft from many washes, a stark contrast to the crisp designer gowns that surrounded her. She was a scholarship student. She was here because attendance was mandatory, not because she belonged. Ilara clutched a small glass of water, her knuckles white. She tried to make herself invisible, to observe without being observed. But in a place like Northwood, poverty was a spotlight. It did not take long for them to find her. Veronica Ashford, the unofficial queen of the academy, glided towards her. She was flanked by her two loyal followers, Tiffany and Chloe. Veronica's dress was a cascade of crimson satin, a fiery statement that matched her personality. Her smile was bright, but it never reached her cold, calculating eyes. "Well, well, look what we have here," Veronica's voice cut through the soft music. A few heads turned in their direction. I did not realize the academy was accepting charity cases for its most exclusive event. Tiffany and Chloe giggled, their laughter like tiny, sharp bells. Ilara's face grew warm. She kept her eyes on the floor. "Hello, Veronica. I am just here like everyone else." "Oh, darling, you are not like everyone else," Veronica purred, stepping closer. She looked down at Ilara's simple dress with theatrical disdain. "Tell me, did you borrow that from a museum? It is a fascinating historical artifact." The small circle of onlookers grew larger. Whispers spread like wildfire. Ilara felt their stares like physical blows. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. She said nothing. Her silence only seemed to fuel Veronica's cruelty. "What is the matter? Cat got your tongue?" Veronica taunted. She then turned to the crowd. "Let us give a round of applause for Ilara. It takes real courage to show up looking like that." A wave of cruel laughter echoed through the ballroom. Ilara's eyes stung with unshed tears. She could not stay here. She could not breathe. With as much dignity as she could muster, she placed her glass on a nearby table and turned to leave. As she walked away, her head held high, the laughter followed her. It was a painful soundtrack to her humiliation. She did not see the two figures watching from a shadowed balcony overlooking the ballroom. One was an elderly man, his face kind but etched with concern. His name was Arthur Penhaligon, the executor of the largest and most secretive fortune in the city, the Blackwood estate. Beside him stood a woman with an air of quiet authority. "She has her grandmother's spirit," the woman said, her voice a low murmur. "She does not break. She endures." Arthur nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on Ilara's retreating form. "The cruelty of these people is a necessary test, I suppose, but it is difficult to watch. Are you sure we should wait?" The woman placed a gentle hand on his arm. "The terms of the will were clear, Arthur. She must turn 18 unaware of her inheritance. She must learn the value of humility and kindness, not the arrogance of wealth. That day is next week." Arthur sighed. "Next week, then. The world will finally know that the forgotten Blackwood heiress has returned, and this entire city will bow to the girl they just mocked." Ilara's world was miles away from the glittering halls of Northwood Academy. It was a small two-bedroom apartment on the top floor of a weathered brick building. The windows overlooked a quiet street lined with old oak trees. Sunlight streamed into the cozy living room, illuminating floating dust motes and the worn-out patterns on the furniture. The air always smelled of baking bread and fresh laundry. It was not a place of wealth, but it was a sanctuary of warmth and love. She lived with her grandmother, Margaret. Margaret was a woman with silver hair often tied in a neat bun and hands that were rarely still. Her eyes held a deep well of kindness, and her smile could make the gloomiest day feel bright. She had raised Ilara since she was a baby. wrapping her in a world of stories, home-cooked meals, and unconditional love. Margaret worked from home as a seamstress, her old sewing machine humming late into the night. It was her tireless work that kept them afloat. Ilara's days were a study in routine and discipline. She woke before dawn, helping Margaret prepare for the day before starting her own journey. The trip to Northwood was a long one, involving 2 bus rides that crossed the city. It was like traveling between 2 different dimensions. She would leave her world of humble, hard-working people and enter a realm of manicured lawns, towering gates, and luxury cars. At the academy, Ilara was a diligent student. She was quiet, observant, and always prepared. She found her refuge in the vast school library. It was a silent, peaceful world where the only thing that mattered was the knowledge inside the books. The stories were her friends. The pages did not care that her shoes were second-hand or that her backpack was frayed at the edges. She excelled in her studies, driven by a simple, powerful dream: to graduate, find a good job, and give her grandmother a life of comfort and rest. After school, she did not stay for social clubs or sports. She went to her part-time job at a small, dusty bookstore downtown. The owner, a kind old man named Mr. Gable, paid her a modest wage to stack shelves and manage the counter. Ilara loved it there. The scent of old paper was a comfort. She would often use her break time to read, losing herself in worlds of adventure and romance, a brief escape from her own reality. Her life was a delicate balance of responsibility and quiet hope. She understood the immense sacrifice it took to send her to a place like Northwood. The scholarship covered her tuition, but the cost of books, uniforms, and simply existing in that world was a constant pressure. She never complained. She carried the weight with a quiet grace, her love for her grandmother fueling her determination. The night of the gala, Margaret had been the one to encourage her to go. She had presented the pale blue dress with a proud smile. It had been Margaret's own dress from decades ago, carefully preserved. "You have a right to be there, my dear," Margaret had said, her voice soft but firm. "You are smarter and kinder than any of them. Do not ever let them make you feel small." Ilara had held those words close to her heart as she entered the ballroom, but the weight of their judgment had been heavier than she expected. The laughter, the stares, the cruel words of Veronica Ashford, they had chipped away at her armor, leaving her feeling exposed and utterly alone. Ilara returned home from the gala long after midnight. The city was quiet. She unlocked the door to the apartment as softly as she could, hoping not to wake her grandmother. But a warm, gentle light spilled from the living room. Margaret was sitting in her favorite armchair, a mending basket in her lap. She looked up, and her welcoming smile faltered as she saw the look on Ilara's face. Ilara tried to force a smile of her own. "I am home. It was a long night." Margaret set her basket aside and stood up. She walked over and gently cupped Ilara's cheek. "Oh, my child, what happened? Tell me." In the safety of her grandmother's arms, the tears she had held back finally fell. She recounted the story in choked whispers, the stares, the laughter, and Veronica's cruel, cutting words. Margaret held her close, stroking her hair and murmuring words of comfort. "Their words are meaningless, Ilara. They are echoes in an empty room. You have a heart of gold. That is the only wealth that matters." The next few days at the academy were a trial. The whispers followed Ilara down every hallway. Students would stop talking when she entered a room. She felt like a pariah, an unwelcome guest in a world she had tried so hard to belong to. But she held her head high, just as her grandmother had told her to. She focused on her classes, determined to prove them wrong through her hard work. But Veronica Ashford was not finished. Her public humiliation of Ilara had only whetted her appetite for cruelty. She could not stand that Ilara still walked the same halls, that she still possessed a quiet dignity that Veronica could not break. She decided to destroy Ilara completely. On a cold Tuesday morning, Ilara was pulled out of her literature class. The school secretary told her that the headmaster needed to see her immediately. A knot of dread tightened in her stomach. The headmaster's office was an intimidating room, filled with dark wood furniture and the weight of authority. Headmaster Sterling sat behind his enormous desk, his face a grim mask. But he was not alone. Veronica and her father, a powerful man with a cold, unforgiving face, was seated in the chairs opposite him. Veronica was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, a picture of false distress. "Miss Ilara, please sit down," Headmaster Sterling said, his voice devoid of warmth. Ilara sat on the edge of the stiff leather chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "A very serious accusation has been made against you," he began. "At the gala, Mrs. Ashford's diamond necklace went missing. It is a family heirloom of immense value. Veronica has just informed us that you bumped into her shortly before she noticed it was gone." The air left Ilara's lungs. The accusation was so absurd, so malicious, that for a moment she could not speak. "What? No, that is not true. I would never steal anything in my life." Veronica let out a small, theatrical sob. "I did not want to believe it either. But you were the only one who got that close to me. And I know you scholarship students, you must be so desperate." Mr. Ashford leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. "My daughter is a victim here. We have been generous patrons of this academy for years. We expect the school to handle this matter appropriately and protect its students from undesirable elements." Ilara looked at the headmaster, pleading with her eyes. "Sir, I am innocent. This is a lie." Headmaster Sterling avoided her gaze. He shuffled some papers on his desk. The choice had already been made. It was the word of a poor girl against the power and influence of the Ashford family. "While there is no definitive proof," he said, clearing his throat, "the situation is untenable. An accusation of this magnitude reflects poorly on the academy. We have decided to terminate your scholarship, effective immediately. Please gather your belongings from your locker. You are no longer a student at Northwood." The words hit her like a physical blow. Terminated. No longer a student. It was over. Her dream, her future, her promise to her grandmother, all of it was gone. It had all been destroyed by a cruel, baseless lie. Ilara walked home in a daze. The city streets were a blur of motion and noise, but she felt completely disconnected from it all, as if she were moving through a dream. The termination letter in her coat pocket felt like a block of solid ice against her skin. Each step towards her apartment building was heavier than the last. How could she tell her grandmother? How could she explain that their shared dream, built on years of sacrifice and hard work, had been shattered by a single, malicious lie? She found Margaret in the living room, humming softly while she worked on a delicate piece of embroidery. She looked up and smiled, but the smile vanished when she saw the utter devastation in Ilara's eyes. Ilara could not speak the words. She simply pulled the folded letter from her pocket and handed it to her grandmother. She watched as Margaret's face, a map of gentle wrinkles and kindness, contorted first in confusion, then in disbelief, and finally in a deep, sorrowful anger. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She did not scold. She did not express disappointment. She simply folded the letter, set it down, and pulled Ilara into a fierce embrace. "They will not break you," Margaret whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "We will not let them." But the world seemed determined to try. News from Northwood Academy, especially scandalous news, had a way of spreading. Veronica and her friends made sure the story of the scholarship thief was told far and wide. It was a cruel, embellished tale that painted Ilara as a desperate criminal. A few days later, the consequences arrived at the one place Ilara still felt safe. She was shelving books at Mr. Gable's store when he called her to the back office. The kind old man looked deeply troubled. He polished his glasses, a sure sign he was distressed. "Ilara, my dear girl," he started, his voice heavy with regret. "I had a visit today, from one of your former classmates' mothers, a Mrs. Ashford." He sighed. "She told me a story. I want you to know I do not believe a word of it. You are the most honest girl I have ever employed." Ilara's heart sank. She knew what was coming. "But this is a small business," he continued, looking pained. "My customers, they talk. I cannot afford to have a scandal attached to my shop. I am so sorry." He slid an envelope across the desk. It contained her final week's wages. Losing her job at the bookstore was a crushing blow. It was not just the small income she desperately needed. It was the loss of her last sanctuary. Now she had nowhere to go, nothing to fill the long, empty days. The financial pressure on their small household mounted quickly. Margaret's income from her sewing was barely enough to cover rent and food. Now, with Ilara's contribution gone, the bills began to pile up. Margaret started working later into the night, the constant hum of her sewing machine a reminder of their growing desperation. Ilara saw the new lines of exhaustion on her grandmother's face and felt a suffocating wave of guilt. Determined to help, she began searching for a new job. She walked for miles every day, answering every help-wanted sign she saw. She applied at diners, coffee shops, grocery stores, and cleaning companies, but the result was always the same. Some turned her away the moment they heard she did not have a high school diploma. Others seemed interested until they asked why she had left a prestigious school like Northwood. The truth was an anchor that sank every opportunity. Rejection after rejection chipped away at her spirit, leaving her feeling worthless and utterly lost. The city, which had once felt full of promise, now seemed like a fortress with every door bolted against her. The weeks that followed were a descent into a quiet, grinding despair. The city was entering a cold, rainy season, and the grey skies seemed to mirror the hopelessness that had settled over Ilara's life. Their small savings dwindled to almost nothing. The stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen table grew taller, a silent monument to their struggle. Then came the blow they had been dreading. An official envelope was taped to their apartment door. The words, printed in stark red letters, felt like a physical assault. Eviction notice. They had 30 days to pay the full amount of overdue rent, or they would be forced to leave. The letter felt impossibly heavy in Ilara's hand, like a final judgment on their failure. Their home, their last sanctuary, was about to be taken from them. The stress became an unbearable weight. The constant worry, the lack of food, and the long nights spent working had taken their toll on Margaret. Ilara found her one morning, slumped over her sewing machine, her forehead burning with a dangerous fever. Her breathing was shallow and ragged. The doctor's visit confirmed their worst fears, severe exhaustion and a bad case of pneumonia. He prescribed rest and a list of expensive medications they could not possibly afford. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Ilara. Her grandmother, her rock, was sick. The eviction notice was a ticking clock, and she was powerless. She looked around their small apartment, her eyes scanning for anything at all they could sell. But there was nothing of value. There was only furniture worn from years of use and books that were loved but worthless, except for one thing. Her eyes fell upon a small lacquered box on her dresser. Inside lay her most treasured possession. It was a small silver locket, shaped like an oval, with a delicate rose engraved on the front. It had belonged to her mother. It was the only thing she had left of the parents she never knew. Her grandmother had given it to her on her 10th birthday, a final, precious link to a forgotten past. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. Selling it felt like a betrayal. It felt like giving up the last piece of her own story. But looking at her grandmother, sleeping fitfully in her bed, Ilara knew there was no other choice. A memory was a luxury she could no longer afford. The pawn shop on the corner of a grim, rain-slicked street smelled of dust, antiseptic, and forgotten dreams. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs as she approached the counter. She felt like a criminal. She pushed the locket under the thick glass towards the gruff, impatient owner. He picked it up, his eyes scanning it with practiced indifference. He pried it open to check the quality of the silver. He squinted under the dim light, bringing it closer to his face. It is not worth much, he grumbled, but there is a tiny inscription on the inside rim. Can barely read it. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. An inscription. She had opened this locket 1,000 times, but she had never noticed one. Can I see? She asked, her voice a near whisper. He pushed it back towards her. Ilara angled it under the weak light bulb hanging above the counter. Her eyes strained to see the impossibly small, elegant script scratched into the silver. It took her a moment to decipher the words. If you are ever in need, find Arthur Penhaligon. He honors all debts. Arthur Penhaligon. The name was completely foreign to her. She had no idea who he was or what the message meant. A debt? What debt? It made no sense. But the words themselves were a lifeline. They were a clue. It was the first glimmer of light she had seen in an endless, suffocating darkness. She looked at the locket, then at the meager amount of cash the pawnbroker was offering. Suddenly, selling it was unthinkable. This small piece of silver was no longer just a memory. It was a promise. It was a path forward. "I have changed my mind," she said, her voice suddenly clear and strong. She scooped up the locket and turned, leaving the shop without a backward glance. She did not have money for the medicine. The eviction notice was still waiting, but as she ran through the cold rain, clutching the locket tightly in her hand, she did not feel despair. For the first time in a long time, she felt a fragile, unfamiliar flicker of hope. The name Arthur Penhaligon became a singular obsession for Ilara. It was a puzzle she had to solve. With her grandmother resting, Ilara made her way to the downtown public library, her old sanctuary. The familiar quiet and the scent of books calmed her racing heart. She sat down at a public computer, the silver locket resting on the table beside her, and typed the name into the search bar. The results appeared instantly, and her breath caught in her chest. Arthur Penhaligon was not some obscure, forgotten friend of her mother. He was one of the most respected and powerful men in the city. He was the senior partner of Penhaligon and Sons, the city's oldest and most prestigious law firm. The firm's address was in the heart of the financial district, in a gleaming tower of glass and steel that seemed to touch the sky. Intimidation warred with desperation inside her. What could a man like that want with her? How could she, a penniless girl accused of being a thief, simply walk into his office? For a moment she almost lost her nerve, but then she thought of her grandmother's labored breathing and the cruel red letters of the eviction notice. She had nothing left to lose. Clenching the locket in her hand, she found a new resolve. The lobby of the Penhaligon and Sons law firm was designed to awe and intimidate. It was a vast, silent space of polished marble floors, dark wood walls, and expensive modern art. A severe-looking receptionist sat behind a desk that was larger than Ilara's kitchen table. She eyed Ilara's simple, damp coat with undisguised disdain. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, her tone making it clear she doubted it. "I need to see Mr. Arthur Penhaligon," Ilara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I do not, but it is urgent. Please just tell him. Tell him Ilara is here about a debt that must be honored." She held out the locket so the woman could see it. The receptionist looked skeptical, but something in Ilara's earnest plea, or perhaps the sight of the antique locket, made her pause. With a sigh, she picked up her phone and spoke in a low, hushed tone. A moment later, her eyes widened slightly. "He will see you now," she said, her voice suddenly laced with a surprising new respect. "His office is on the top floor." Arthur Penhaligon's office was the opposite of the cold lobby. It was a warm, comfortable room, lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and filled with afternoon sunlight. An elderly man with kind, intelligent eyes and a warm smile stood to greet her. It was the man from the gala balcony. "Miss Ilara," he said, his voice gentle and welcoming. "Please come in. I have been waiting for you for a very long time." Tears welled in Ilara's eyes as a wave of relief washed over her. She did not understand what was happening, but she knew instinctively that she had found a friend. In a rush of words, she explained everything: the expulsion, the lost job, the eviction, her grandmother's illness. Arthur listened with a pained, sympathetic expression. When she was finished, he did not offer empty platitudes. He offered immediate action. He picked up the phone on his desk. "Helen, send Dr. Evans to this address immediately, with whatever medicine he needs," he said calmly. He made a second call. "Contact the management of this building. Settle Miss Ilara's account in full for the next year." Just like that, with 2 simple phone calls, the terrifying weights that had been crushing her were lifted. "I know you have many questions," Arthur said, his eyes full of a deep sadness. "I was your mother's lawyer and her friend. I made her a promise that I am bound to keep. A promise that you would be raised far from the dangers and corruption of great wealth until you were old enough to handle it." He leaned forward. "Your life has been unfairly difficult, my child, but that is about to end. Please come back to my office this Friday. It is your 18th birthday, is it not? On that day, the promise will be fulfilled, and your true life will finally begin. Friday arrived, a day of bright, clear sunshine that felt like a promise. It was Ilara's 18th birthday. She met Arthur at his office, where the kind woman from the gala balcony was also waiting. Her name was Eleanor Vance, and she was the chief trustee of the Blackwood estate. Together, they explained everything. Ilara was not just the heir to a fortune. She was the last descendant of the city's most historic and philanthropic family. Her parents had died tragically when she was a baby. Her grandmother, the family's matriarch, had stipulated in her will that Ilara be raised in secret, away from the corrupting influence of wealth. She wanted her heir to learn empathy, resilience, and the value of a kind heart. Arthur and Eleanor were the guardians of this secret, tasked with watching over her until this very day. Her new life was to begin immediately and publicly. That afternoon, the Blackwood Foundation was holding a major press conference. For years, the foundation had been managed by a board. Today, they would announce the return of the true heir. The grand ballroom of the City Hall was buzzing with energy. Every major news outlet was present. The city's most powerful figures, business leaders, politicians, and socialites filled the seats. Among them, sitting in the front row, were Veronica Ashford and her father. Mr. Ashford was a junior board member of a rival foundation, and he was eager to see who his new competition would be. Veronica scanned the room with an air of bored superiority. Then her eyes narrowed. She saw Ilara standing quietly near the side of the stage, speaking with Arthur Penhaligon. Veronica could not believe the audacity. She nudged her father. "Look, it is that girl who got expelled. How on earth did she get in here? I cannot believe they let the catering staff wander around like this." Mr. Ashford glanced over, a flicker of annoyance on his face. He did not give Ilara a second thought. Ilara felt their stares, but for the first time, it did not affect her. She was not the same girl who had hidden behind a pillar at the gala. She was dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored dark blue suit. Her posture was poised. Her expression was calm and confident. She was not hiding. She was waiting. Finally, the chairman of the board stepped up to the podium. The room fell silent. For decades, the Blackwood Foundation has served this city, guided by the vision of its founder. But the family's direct leadership has been absent. Today, that changes. A murmur of excitement rippled through the audience. The long-lost heir, having now come of age, is ready to take her rightful place. It is my profound honor to introduce to you the sole beneficiary of the Blackwood estate and the new chairwoman of the Blackwood Foundation, Miss Ilara Blackwood. Ilara stepped from the wings and walked toward the podium. The name echoed through the silent ballroom. 100 camera flashes went off at once like a burst of lightning. Veronica's smug smile evaporated, replaced by a mask of slack-jawed disbelief. Mr. Ashford went pale, looking as if he had seen a ghost. They, along with everyone else who had ever sneered at the scholarship girl, stared in utter shock. The girl they had mocked, humiliated, and cast out was a Blackwood. She was not just wealthy, she was a legacy. She held the fate of the city's largest fortune in her hands. Ilara reached the podium and looked out at the sea of stunned faces. She did not look at the Ashfords, not yet. She began to speak, her voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphones. "I have learned that there are many kinds of poverty," she began. "I have known the struggle of an empty purse, but I have also seen the poverty of an empty heart, a poverty of compassion, a poverty of kindness." She paused, letting the words sink in. "The Blackwood Foundation will therefore have a new mission. We will not just provide financial support, we will create opportunities for those who are overlooked. We will fund scholarships not just for academic brilliance, but for exceptional character. We will fight for those who are judged not for who they are, but for where they come from. We will invest in kindness, because that is the one currency that can truly change the world." The room erupted in thunderous applause. As she stepped down from the stage, her path took her directly in front of the Ashfords. Mr. Ashford scrambled to his feet, his face a mess of panic and false sincerity. Miss Blackwood," he stammered, "there has been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. On behalf of my daughter, Ilara stopped and finally looked directly at Veronica. The girl who had seemed so powerful and intimidating now looked small and pathetic. Ilara's voice was not angry. It was quiet, calm, and devastatingly final. "There was no misunderstanding, Mr. Ashford. Your daughter told lies that destroyed my life." She held Veronica's gaze. "And I will be forever grateful to her, because she made room for this one to begin." She then turned and walked away, leaving them standing alone, exposed and utterly defeated in the full glare of the public eye. The story of the secret heiress was a fire that consumed the city's attention. The next day, every newspaper and news channel featured Ilara's face on the front page. They juxtaposed a photo of her poised at the podium with a grainy image of a stunned and horrified Veronica Ashford. The narrative was powerful and clear, a story of cruelty and lies brought to justice. Ilara was hailed as a real-life Cinderella, a symbol of grace under pressure. The Ashford family, in contrast, became instant villains in the public's imagination. The consequences of their actions were swift and brutal. The world they had so carefully constructed, built on influence and reputation, crumbled overnight. Mr. Ashford was politely but firmly asked to resign from the corporate boards he sat on. His most important clients and business partners pulled their investments, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. The Ashford name, once a key that opened every door, was now a mark of shame. The phones in their sprawling mansion fell silent. The invitations to galas and exclusive events stopped coming. They were socially and financially ruined, trapped in a prison of their own making. Northwood Academy, in a desperate attempt at damage control, acted decisively. They issued a full public apology to Ilara Blackwood, praising her character and condemning the unconscionable actions of other students. The headmaster who had so coldly expelled her was quietly forced into early retirement, and an official letter was sent to the Ashford home. Using the same formal language from Ilara's termination letter, the academy informed Veronica that her enrollment was permanently terminated due to a severe breach of the school's code of honor. The justice was perfectly poetically complete. Ilara, however, took no joy in their downfall. She was too busy building her new life. She did not seek revenge. She simply let the truth do its work. Her first act as chairwoman of the foundation was to establish the Compassion and Character Scholarship, a program designed to help students who, like her, had the talent but not the means. The very first scholarship was awarded to a bright, kind student from her old, humble neighborhood, ensuring another person's dream would not be deferred. She paid a visit to Mr. Gable's bookstore. The old man cried when he saw her, apologizing profusely for having fired her. Ilara simply gave him a warm hug and, through the foundation, provided a grant that would keep his beloved shop open for another 50 years. She cleared her own name, not with words, but with acts of grace. The greatest resolution, however, was a personal one. With the help of the best doctors, Margaret made a full and swift recovery. Her cough disappeared, and the light returned to her eyes. Ilara moved them out of the small, cramped apartment with the eviction notice on the door. Their new home was not a cold, empty mansion. It was a beautiful, light-filled house with a large, sunny garden where Margaret could plant flowers. One evening, Ilara and Margaret sat together on the porch, wrapped in warm blankets, watching the city lights twinkle below. The air was peaceful. The struggles of the past few months felt like a distant, faded dream. "You have your grandmother's name," Margaret said softly, taking Ilara's hand. "But you have your mother's heart. She would be so proud of the woman you have become." In that quiet, simple moment, surrounded by peace and the love of her grandmother, Ilara felt truly, completely victorious. 2 years passed. The city changed, and so did Ilara. The story of the secret heiress slowly faded from the headlines, replaced by the quiet, steady work of the Blackwood Foundation. Ilara's name was no longer associated with scandal, but with hope. One sunny afternoon, she returned to Northwood Academy. She walked through the imposing iron gates, not as a timid student, but as the guest of honor for their annual awards ceremony. The hallways that had once been a gauntlet of whispers and judgmental stares now welcomed her with respectful silence. Students and teachers alike smiled as she passed. The culture of the school, slowly but surely, had begun to change. She stood on the stage of the grand auditorium, at the very podium where the headmaster had announced school news. She was there to present the second annual Blackwood Compassion and Character Scholarship. She looked out at the faces of the students, and in the front row, she saw a young girl who looked nervous and out of place, clutching her books just as Ilara once did. "Success is not about how high you can climb," Ilara said, her voice warm and confident, filling the large hall. "It is about how many people you can lift up with you. Kindness is not a weakness. It is the most powerful and enduring strength you will ever possess." She called the name of the recipient, and the nervous young girl from the front row walked onto the stage, her face a mixture of shock and radiant joy. As Ilara handed her the award, she saw her own past and a better future, all in one hopeful moment. Her life was now a tapestry of purpose and peace. Margaret, healthier and happier than ever, spent her days in the magnificent rose garden of their home. The constant worry that had shadowed her features for years had been replaced by a serene contentment. Her laughter was a frequent and welcome sound in their sunlit house. Arthur and Eleanor were no longer just guardians of a will. They were family. They were a constant presence, offering wisdom, support, and the easy comfort of people who had known her family for generations. Their evenings were often spent together, sharing simple dinners filled with stories and laughter. Ilara was no longer an orphan, cared for by a single loving guardian. She was the center of a small, strong, and devoted family. That night, after the guests had gone, Ilara stood on the balcony of her home, looking out at the glittering expanse of the city below. She thought of the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the girl in the pale blue dress, hiding in the shadows of the gala. She did not feel sorrow for that girl. She felt a deep, abiding pride. Every hardship, every tear, every moment of despair had been a lesson. They had forged her. They had taught her empathy. They had given her a perspective that no amount of money could ever buy. Her great-grandmother's wish had come true. She had inherited a great fortune, but she had earned her wisdom. Her heart was full, and she knew with a peaceful certainty that she would spend the rest of her life sharing its wealth with the world. And so, Ilara's incredible journey finds its peaceful and hopeful conclusion. Her story is a powerful reminder that the greatest storms often lead to the most beautiful destinations. She lost what she thought was everything, only to discover who she was truly meant to be. It teaches us that true wealth is not something that can be counted in a bank. It is measured in kindness, in resilience, and in the quiet strength of a compassionate heart. Ilara's story shows us that even in the face of terrible injustice and cruelty, a person's spirit can refuse to be broken. Hope can be a tiny, flickering light in a vast darkness, but it is enough to guide us forward. We would love to know what you think about this story. What was the most powerful moment for you? Was it the devastating scene when Ilara was expelled based on a lie? Was it the thrilling moment of hope when she discovered the secret inscription inside the locket? Or was it the deeply satisfying confrontation at the press conference when the truth was finally revealed to the world? Share your thoughts and feelings with us in the comments section below. Each comment adds to our wonderful community, where we can all discuss the power of storytelling and the lessons we learn from these journeys. Have you ever faced a situation where you felt misunderstood or unfairly judged? What gives you strength when you are feeling lost? Your story could be an inspiration to someone else reading. If Ilara's story of resilience and ultimate triumph touched your heart, please take a moment to show your support by giving this video a like. It helps us so much, and it allows these stories to reach more people who might be looking for a message of hope and encouragement in their own lives. And if you are new to our channel and wish to hear more emotional and uplifting stories like this one, we would be honored if you would subscribe. We are dedicated to bringing you tales that warm the heart and stir the soul. Make sure to also click the notification bell. That way you will never miss a new story from us. Thank you for being a part of our community and for sharing this time with us. We hope Ilara's journey has left you feeling inspired. Remember to be kind to one another, because you never know the silent battles people are fighting. Until we meet in the next story, stay hopeful.